Happy Friday, everybody. I promised you I'd have four more decks. I didn't realize that it was already Thursday, though, when I said that. And I think I said for 2 more days, but obviously today is Friday. Maybe I'll get some stuff scheduled out for the weekend, but I am going to be pretty busy, so I might not get to uploading anything. But without further ado, I have four more decks for you guys. And I do want to throw a disclaimer out there. These four decks, obviously, I threw them together between yesterday and today, so they have not had extensive testing. They are more based on theory, and we will go over that and talk about it. Whereas the decks from yesterday are actually decks that I had been building and testing for a while, so I put a little more stock in them. I made slight alterations after last weekend, but overall, those were decks that I had actually been actively playing. But yeah, so I'm going to start out with Purple Steel Aggro. This is actually a deck that how many times can I say actually? This was a deck that I was really considering playing for Set Championship. It ended up taking a backseat to Blurple and Ruby Amethyst. If I can go get my promo Saturday or possibly Sunday, I'm probably going to take this deck if I can make it to another event because I just really like the color combination and like to try other things once I get my promo. So there's a strong chance that we will end up trying to play this at a different one, but we have in our one-drop spot Chernobog's Followers, Diablo, Broom, and Maleficent. So really trying to be aggressive with this deck, and if you see the two-drop spot, I have the four Smees, essentially, because Doc you don't really want to play on two. Doc is there for that once you dump your hand, late game draw power, basically. So on turn one, you obviously want to come out with a one-drop, ideally something like a Maleficent. Turn two, either something like a Smee, or you come back with two one-drops, or you come back with one-drop plus Befuddle or Fire the Cannons to slow your opponent's roll, to mess with their tempo, to just disrupt their play lines. So you don't necessarily need a true two-drop. You dump your hand pretty quickly. You put characters down on the board, and that's why we're running the 15 one-drops. Like I said, Smee is a very strong turn two, but otherwise you just come back with another one drop plus one of your one drops, which again could be Befuddle or Fire the Cannon to help protect your other ones. The 11 also being your draw cards in the Broom, Diablo, Chernobog. This type of build, I think that Broom is the worst of them. I don't always think that, but when you're trying to quest out and not necessarily challenge your opponent, I think that Diablo is far better than Broom is, and just overall Chernobog's Followers is very, very strong. I do think Diablo, though, is the best one here because it will replace itself when banished. In our three-drop spot, we got quite a few cards, actually. There's a lot of utility here. Sometimes you are going to have to go on the offensive, and sometimes you want to bounce your character. Sometimes there's just threats that you have to deal with. So we do have the Fox and Crabs in there a little bit. Some people would argue you could take this stuff out. I've really never been like, darn, I have a Fox. What am I going to do with that? Because if you're like, okay, I don't need this, you ink it. It's pretty easy. Otherwise, we also have White Roses, Tinkerbell, and Lawrence. So White Roses, I've talked about, is just another way to generate immediate lore to get your count up. It's like Goat, but not as good. And then I've also been very proactive on how strong that Tinkerbell Genie 3-4 play is, and I truly believe that if you're playing an Amethyst aggro deck, I think that Tinkerbell should be in there. I don't see her enough, and I think she is very strong and actually very slept on. Playing this card has done wonders for me in events. Lawrence also with that +4 means it can't get hit by certain things like, say, a Medusa until they put damage on it. And just questing for 4, threatening to take out a character, or questing for 2, threatening to take out a character is very strong. 2 Pete's in there just as a little more utility in that 3-drop spot. We skipped over the 1-2 being the location, and the idea, I guess, here is, well, you are playing Doc, but you're playing your other characters too, and you're trying to quest out and win, right? But if you can move characters here, you can start pinging damage at your opponent, kind of like Fire the Cannons, ping with the Mine, and Befuddle to disrupt your opponent's flow, while still developing your board state and being able to put pressure onto your opponent that way. Kind of like in a way that Diggy Diggy Hole does, just with a different color combination. This one's a little bit less aggressive because you don't have as many one-drops that can go questing for a bunch. You don't have the Piglet on turn 2 either, in addition to your Smee. and also Lilo. So you got a little less aggro here, but a little more consistency, but kind of a similar style to that deck, but enough to change it up and just kind of throw your opponents off. Genie, just very strong card draw as well. So overall, I really like the card. And we have 4 goats too. Goat, bounce goat for game. One reason that we do still have the fox in there, but otherwise just playing the goat is very threatening to your opponent, especially when you're starting to close it out, because if they try to deal with it, you're going to get that lore as well. And then 3 Gantu to finish off games. His a 4 strength character, which is really strong in the current meta. B prep seeing less play in the Sisu decks. Usually it's like a 1 to 2 of. In Ruby Amethyst, it is a 3 or 4 of still, so do mind that. But outside of that, there's not many direct answers for this until they get to like 9 ink with Maleficent Dragon. Blue decks, I guess, with Hades, possibly Let It Go. But this is a card that really forces an immediate answer, because even if he quests once, you could argue that he did his job. And if he quests twice, well, now you're just being greedy. So if I was going to play Purple Steel, I think that this would be a very similar deck. I'd probably grind out some testing, make maybe some minor tweaks, but overall this is the deck that I would start grinding out on Lorcanito and testing. So moving on forward, we got 3 more decks once again that we're going to go over. Steel Song, this is a deck that I actually would be most confident of these 4 in without testing, just because I've played Steel Song in the past, and it's a deck that, well, I haven't really, there's not a whole lot here that's off the normal. Like, playing these cards, it's very similar to ways I have in the past, so I'm pretty confident that it would work how I would intend it to. So going back to the Queen shift line, because it's a little bit faster than the Robin Hood shift line, and in this format I think that's actually really important. Turning on things like the turn 2 Whole New World can be very strong too, especially if you pay attention to your opponent and see how they are when they mulligan. Just knowing if it's going to disrupt them or how much it'll throw their hand off. Being able to take advantage of turn 3 Zeuses as well. So we're maxing out on Ursula on 2, just to really be able to answer those daisies fast, to answer those genies fast, to answer so many of the current meta threats very quickly. Playing the three daisies and 4 Smees on turns 1 and 2 in tandem with the 4 Lawrence on 3. So that way you can try to go underneath of the Popsicle decks, or even possibly Ruby Amethyst before going into that mid-game battle with them. You want to try to jump out ahead on them and put the pressure on them to truly have answer after answer after answer, because you want to just apply a ton of early pressure against them. In the more aggressive matchups, obviously you have your Songs, you have your Storm, you have your Strength of the Raging Fire, these types of cards, and you can also just crash into them and control the board that way. Turn 3, obviously your aerials are going to just be standard. Your Peets, I think 3 is enough. I don't think you necessarily need to play more. Lawrence and then Pluto in the 4-drop spot, both also very good targets for your Rapunzel in addition to your Smee, but we already knew that. That's why these cards were seeing play in Steel Song. Then if we look a little bit further, just the 1 Naveen, I was debating on even keeping Naveen at all. I was like, is he worth it? And sometimes he is, but this would probably be the card I'm most close to cutting. I think Naveen is worth it as the Saki one-off. It's weird because you need him with another card. He's not good on his own. You need him with another card. But if you have the right other card in scenarios, sometimes it just bails you out so hard. So I did leave him in there as a one-off. The Pluto is a bodyguard, which can help protect your singers when it comes down. And again, if they try to take it out and they fail to do so, you set up just great healing and draws off of your Rapunzel as well. The Queen shift line, like we mentioned, and that kind of ties in with the World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which the World's Greatest Criminal Mind already hits things like Big Sisu, which is very popular, hits Tamatoa, hits Maleficent Dragon, hits Maui Half Shark, hits Maui. And once you put it in combo with your Queen, you can hit virtually any card in the game. Not quite any card in the game, but virtually any card in the game. And then the aerial shift, like the aerial shift versus aggressive matchups is enough to swing that tempo turn 4 right back to you. It might seem like you're out of it, but if you can do it on turn 4, especially on the play, there's still hope. You're not too far behind yet if you have the right cards. You can really play into it. I guess that'd be a turn 5 actually. So depending how aggressive they are into aggro, you're going to want to go Cinderella 1 so that you can threaten your songs and get another character developed on 2. And then if you can hit like the Ursula, because obviously 3 is going to be your aerial. And I say obviously, even though it completely went over my head about not having the ink to pay for your aerial's ability when you shift her on 4, because obviously you'd have 4 ink and you shift her for 4. So glad I caught that right away. Like I said, I haven't played the deck in a hot minute, so it's been a little bit rusty, a lot more theory here than testing, like was already said. But overall, I really like Sonic Warrior right now. I really, really do. I think that once she's established and free to do things and you have ink to use, it's kind of like Muses when you just get the songs rolling, right? Like you just start to control the entire board state. She does it in a similar fashion, and her 8 willpower really is not a joke and nothing to just laugh at. Like that means she can stick around for quite a while sometimes. One of the few decks to still play Whole New World as well. Overall, where do I think Steel Song ranks? It's hard because Popsicle is so popular and it's not a great matchup. You really got to try to go under the deck because this deck can't go over on it, and it can be difficult. Sometimes you'll see like Piglet played in there as well in addition to the Smeeze, so you can really get aggressive. But a well-timed Whole New World can really hurt your opponent, especially if you start to get them in that, like when they're at like that 5 ink mark and then you drop the Whole New World on them, and you might hit that half shark that they were trying to play up to, or keep an eye out for like big Sisus and B preps. A lot of time if there's 2 B preps gone, you could not guarantee they don't have a third, but you can safely assume that they might be out, or there's only 1 left. Or big Sisus, 3 to 4 is the common ratio. So just when you Whole New World, look at what they discarded. Ask them to see their discard pile so you can kind of make mental notes on which blowout cards they have. You need to outlast their blowout cards. So if you can actually like Whole New World them, next turn Whole New World them, and hit them a few times and dump those cards out of their hand, if you can get rid of their end game before they get to their end game, then you can win. It's really is that simple and straightforward. Being that simple, right? Like you're like, oh, you just explained a really complicated scenario. I called it that simple. Amber Amethyst. How do I feel about Amber Amethyst? I've kind of mentioned this on tier lists and things like that, but it's still a deck. It's the first deck I ever played competitively, so it's still a deck that I do enjoy to look back at and consider at times. I'm not overly sold on it, but in the right scenario, like an aggressive deck, especially one like this, can just come in and just wreck, because you force so many answers with your opponent. This is another one of those decks where on 2 you don't have to come back with the 2-drop. You can come back with multiple 1-drops and just apply that pressure to your opponent, being able to play the Daisies and the Lilos on 1, opting for no Maleficent. You could play Maleficent instead of Lilo if you have her. But otherwise I went with the 3 draw cards because we want consistency, we want draw cards. I don't like Amethyst Chromacon. I don't like Amethyst Chromacon. Since the card came out, it's been a staple 4 of in this deck. Since it's come out, this deck has fallen off. Since it's come out, this deck has been nowhere to be seen. Maybe it's time to not play some of those cards like that. I shouldn't say that, because there has been a couple tops in this format, like in December, but for the most part, this deck really has disappeared and has not done a whole lot as of late. And I think part of that is just the way the deck is being played. I don't really agree with it. I don't think the deck's in a great spot, and that's why personally I haven't been playing it. But when I see lists and people playing it, something about it just doesn't sit right. I don't think that it's being played properly, and maybe that's just me being up on my high horse, but I could be wrong. I could be definitely wrong. But I went with the 1-drops for consistency cards, and if you can get enough of them developed, you can put a lot of pressure on your opponent that way. Turn 2, obviously, we're going to be playing the Piglets. Lilo as well, because once you get into that later game, especially if you're like top decking, you got like 4 or 5 ink, and you're like, okay, the majority of my deck is like 3 cost or lower. I'm going to bring Piglet back, or I'm going to bring Piglet back, if only. I'm going to bring Lilo back and then just hard play whatever is in my hand, and we're just going to roll with it, try to put some threats on, and see what we can't do. The Simba shift line, I do think the Simba shift line is actually pretty strong right now, and it's one of the few good things that the deck has going for it with some of the newer cards. Baloo also is very good. Being able to crash a Baloo into something to get 2 lore, very good. The Donald Duck, Baloo and Donald Duck, in my opinion, are the 2 best bodyguards in the game. Pluto would like to enter the chat, but in this type of deck, like an aggressive style deck, I think these are the 2 best. If I'm playing a steel aggressive deck, I still think these 2 are better than Pluto in that regard. And then we have the roses, we have the goats for that guaranteed lore that we already kind of talked about with the purple steel deck. We got the Tinkerbell Genie, like we talked about with the purple steel deck. Same reasoning here. We don't have Fire the Cannons, but we do bump up Befuddle to 3. And adding in that Chernabog, because if they don't have the answer for it, this is a card that realistically can stick around for 2 or 3 turns and get you like 6 to 9 lore, and that's just complete game wrecking. Like, this card can be such a closer and such a threat on the field that your opponent really does have to find a way to deal with it. I would not play this deck into like a heavy Steel Song meta. Into green steel could be very difficult as well, because if you can't, well, you can answer the double singer Ursula. You might not be able to answer her the first time, though, so then when she double sings, you're going to be in trouble, right? Like, Ursula double singing the Storm or the Strength is just going to put in work on you. So I'd say, like, green steel, Steel Song, definitely going to be really bad matchups. But you could definitely go under... What did I say in the beginning? Not definitely. Was it actually? Maybe? Actually and definitely. 2 favorite words of the video, apparently. Apparently, that was it. It was apparently and definitely the 2 favorite words of this video. Ruby Amethyst and Popsicle, though, I would try to go under them, try to win out fast, try to just go. You got Dwarf Mine. That deck can be a little problematic because you want to try to go fast like them and match them card for card. But at the same time, when that Dwarf Mine hits the board, you almost have to throw characters at it and get rid of it. The Dwarf Mine sticking is going to be one of their best ways to beat you. And in addition to that, Calhoun is going to be a big problem. You would essentially... There's not many 3 strength characters we're running. Like, White Roses would be a great one that if they have a Calhoun, I'm not going to quest with. I'm going to leave her up and take out other... Like, use her to take out the Calhoun. Focusing on your evasives, though, you can kind of get around her that way versus the Diggy Diggy Hole deck, going for your Tinkerbell and Genie. Just your opponent's not going to have a great way to answer them outside of moving to the mine, which we kind of mentioned, taking that out to eliminate that equation. Otherwise, Goat, Simba, your Chernabog, these are the types of cards to get rid of that Calhoun. Befuddle also working amazingly. Just keep befuddling it, bounce it back to their hand. Don't allow them to establish that Calhoun and be able to challenge into your characters that way is going to be very helpful as well. One more deck. This one was the most fun one to do and the most headache one and probably the spiciest one. And we're going to take a quick drink and then we're going to talk about it. Blue Steel. Blue Steel. Sorry about no Amber Emerald. I was actually trying to do it, and because it was commented on the last video and someone asked me to do it. It was a deck that I messed with earlier in the format too, and I just could not find a deck that I liked. I really couldn't, and I tried and I play tested things, and I couldn't find anything I liked. And thinking yesterday, last night, this morning, I put a few things together, and I don't like it enough to bring it to you guys yet. So maybe that's one I'll shelf till after this weekend, and like next week or so I'll try to test it out more. But for right now, Amber Emerald I don't think's in a great spot, and I need more time to put something competent together for you guys in that regard. But Blue Steel. So the thought process here: Ruby Amethyst, Popsicle. How do we beat them decks? You either have to go under them or over them? Right? Under them or over them? Not many people would have thought about going over Popsicle until Ed did it. We don't quite have the Lady Tremaines in the cards he does. So I was thinking about it. I'm like, Popsicle, Popsicle, Popsicle. Not a very fast deck, so you have time. Ramp up a whole bunch. What do you have to be able to get rid of there? Maui Half Sharks are a threat. Big Sisu's a threat. Tamatoa is a threat. And Maleficent Dragon. These are kind of like their threat cards. They're probably playing 4 Maleficent Dragons, 3 to 4 Tamatoas, 3 Sisus, and 2 or 3 Half Sharks. That's a lot of cards. So let's go maxes. That's what? 3, 3, 4, 4. So 14 cards. We need to be able to answer 14 really strong cards. That's why we ended up putting in 3 Hades and 2 Let It Go. So we got 5 answers. We can answer almost half of them. Just card for card, just answer it. Boom, done. That was something I wanted to be able to do. Like, I wanted to be able to threaten them early, right? So we also have a 1-drop in here, which is kind of interesting, but we also have the Dwarf Mine in here. And this idea was for the quicker decks, which I'm going to jump around here for a bit. So again, Hades, Let It Go for trying to go over the big Ruby decks, the 2. Then we have the Dwarf Mine, and we have our Dwarf lineup with the 2 Happies, 3 Docs. Doc obviously is draw power as well. But this helping enable you into those faster matchups when you want to move characters to the mine, throw 1 or 2 damage at your opponent, control the board state, and then get to your win condition, your late game, your end game. In addition to that, you can Popsicle or Fortisphere or Happy on 1 versus like the slow decks. Turn 2, you want to ramp. Turn 3, then you come back with like your Hiram, or you can go for multiple cards. You can put down a location like a McDuck Manor, and if you hit McDuck Manor on 3, Gantu on 4 versus like Popsicle, you're going to apply a lot of pressure on them. And Gantu is going to apply a lot of pressure on them because what do they have? Maui Hero to all. That's probably their first answer. Be prep. Them are really their answers. If they have a Grandma Tala, they could crash her into it. If they have... yeah, Big Sisu can crash into it, but she would also die. You're looking at like Tamatoa, Maleficence. Like, they don't really have a great answer for it. You could say Ice Block, but they don't play Medusa anymore. So I think that Gantu is a really good answer here for the Popsicle matchup, because he might stick around for 2 turns, and that's 8 lore. If you can pick up like 4 or 5 lore before him, that might be pushing it. Maybe say 3 lore before the Gantu, and then he can pick you up 8. You're up to 11 pretty quickly. Then they have to answer that, though, so that means they have to focus on that. And then if you slap down some locations in between here too, there's a good chance that you can win this game pretty quickly going under those decks. And then jumping back to where we were before, you have the Hades and the Let It Goes to remove their big threats and get rid of them that way. Same thing like with the Lady Tremaines in Ruby Amethyst, or I mean, Ruby Amethyst probably still playing Medusa for the most part outside of the ones playing Ed's list, but that doesn't hit Gantu neither because they can't play Ice Block. Ruby Amethyst will, though, have answers like, Fox is going to answer your Gantu really easily. But yeah, so first, like Purple Steel, again, jumping all over the place. Gantu is, not sure why I say Gantu. Purple Steel, Dwarf Mine, Amethyst Emerald Tempo. These type of quicker decks, you want to, again, 1-drop, hit something. Even if it's a draw 1, that's fine. Like, you don't need that character presence on 1 because you can catch back up. So if you hit Popsicle or Fortisphere on 1, Then on turn two is very, very important to hit your ramp though. And I'm actually okay hitting like the Sail the Azurite Sea, because if you play that, you draw the card, you ink the card, and then you can come back with a 1-drop. Tipo inks it Exerted, so it's just not going to be that helpful for this turn. He does leave you a board presence card though, so there is that. Hitting your ramp on 2 is just so insanely important in this deck. And then turn 3, you come back with multiple characters into those aggro matchups. Getting to those Calhouns, they're going to put in just all kinds of work for you. And you shouldn't be too far behind at that point either. So I think that you can actually do pretty well into the aggressive decks. And like I said, versus the slower control style decks, you go like turn 1, whatever, turn 2, ramp, turn 3, then you either come out with the Hiram and start drawing your cards, or you come out with like the McDuck Manor, and then turn 4, the Gantu. So if you go Manor Gantu on 3-4, you're going to be in a great spot versus any slower deck. But overall, just another idea. Still could, like I said, use some testing and refining, but this was one where I changed it, and then I ate, and then I changed it, and then I had a snack, and then I changed it, and then I showered, and then I changed it, and then here we are. So lots of theory here. Could use testing, refining. I don't know how I feel about Fishbone Quill. I really don't. I don't know that my character count's high enough to warrant a Great Stone Dragon, but I also wanted to have more more items for the Hiram Draw engine. I don't know. I really don't. Like, because we got the 4 Tipo, the 4 C, the 3 How Far All Goes, which I absolutely love the card because it's consistency and ramp. You get to know what you put. You get to see to. You get to what you need to get to. Really, really like the card overall. Fishbone Quill, it's weird to say that it's ink or draw fodder with a little bit of ramp. Like, you're not going to use it to aggressively dump your hand because we're not playing the whole New Worlds. So it's such a weird card in this build. Yeah, that's pretty much the best way to put it. It is such a weird card in this build. It can work out nice, and it can help ramp you and get you to where you need to go. And if you have the right draw cards and you have other items and you get your Hiram going, it's going to be wonderful. But I guess don't over ramp with your Quill is my best advice, because I don't think it's necessarily needed. It's just there to pop and draw some cards and maybe ramp you once or twice while it's on the board, and that's really means it did its job at that point. If it ramps you twice and you just use it as draw fodder, I'm okay with that. The 2 Tamatoas. We're trying to be a little bit quicker and less into that super long game, so less Tamatoas and more upfront action in the deck, which is weird. I know. I think Blue Steel is not doing anything right now, and I think a big part of that means the deck needs a big makeover. So that's what we did. We made a big makeover. Maybe I take this deck to set championships. I really don't know what I'm going to do if I can get my promo this weekend. I want to try out some things. This might be the deck I try out. We'll see. The one Mufasa, I actually really like the card. I was skeptical, but played against it a couple times and then played it a couple times. I'm like, this card actually overperforms. I even put it into there as a 3 of it once. I'm like, nope, not that good. I'm bricking on it. I am clogging my hand. It is not that good. It is going back to a 1 of, and I really liked it at 1 though. So overall, this is a very weird deck, and I think that there's potential here though. I really, really think that there's potential here. I guess let me know down below what you guys think about these decks. What would you change? Because truly, I'll take it all into consideration, because like I said, these were put together on short notice, on theory, just kind of like running through scenarios in my head, like, okay, I like this, this, this. But sometimes when we play certain cards for so many formats, we get tunnel visioned in. It's like, hey, I'm playing Amber Amethyst. I have to play these cards. Like, this is just has to be in there. And that's not always true. Sometimes we get tunnel visioned in on things. And that's why outside opinions are actually nice to have. So All these decks need refining. Like I said, it was too short notice to give you tried, true, tested decks. All 4 of these need refining. So I do want to throw that out there. Just let me know what you think, I guess, is the best way I can put it. Thanks for watching, though, guys. Good luck, everybody, this weekend at your set championships. Again, if you didn't check it out, I have a video yesterday with some of the more high-tier decks, and those ones are tried, true, and tested. So if you want to go check that out, otherwise just stuff on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.